Hey, and welcome to another episode of Grit in the Wild podcast. I'm your co host, Adam Short,
And I'm your other host, Melissa Short.
and together we're here to talk about spiritual abuse, religious trauma, toxic faith, and lots of things in between. And so today we just decided to kind of do a spontaneous, unplanned, no notes, just more of a conversation around just our most recent here in the past week or two, our experience and our own story, and trying to unpack some of the painful stuff that we're just navigating through, having been through several chapters of toxic faith and spiritual abuse, and then also witnessing a lot of the latest scandals that are happening right now, especially like with Daystar and with Dr. Michael Brown and so many others that I can name right now. So we just thought we would get together and try to have a conversation in front of the camera. This is a lot of what we do regularly anyway. We talk about this stuff and we try to process it and make sense of it and move through it. So we're not really sure where this will go today, but we're hoping that it helps somebody out there in your process as you're also working through whatever season you're in, whether it's deconstruction, spiritual abuse, or something even, deeper or darker than that, like, you know, CSA or something like that. So we're just hoping to help you process and we process as well.
Yeah, love it.
So what's on your mind today?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Loaded question.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that's really been on my mind, and it's because of it's where I'm at. So it's this is kind of like where I'm at on this journey with this stuff, with this spiritual abuse stuff and healing. A lot of times people speak right when they're already like healed or like moved past it, but we're like coming on here like in the middle of our process,
Yeah,
really.
true.
So it's kind of messy, but
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really come up for me is this idea of right speaking out and sharing your stories. And it's right, it's so common with like everything that we follow as far as like I'll say this like in the charismatic church right now, there's so much being like exposed and brought out into the open,
Right.
like really bad stuff like CSA, and right, we've got things like false, people you data mining for prophecy and just things being covered up, like all kinds of just like stuff being exposed. And so I think for me, like where I'm at, what comes to mind right now is like why? Like why do we share our stories,
Mm. Yeah.
why do you speak out about it? Because there's so much like there is so much shame put on victims and people that choose to talk about what happened to them.
Yeah.
Eh,
True.
Yeah. And like there's these four words, and I actually wrote them down because it's like, and I can't remember if I mentioned this in our first podcast, but like there's four words that I've like observed over got the little thumbs up there. Um over like our time in the church that are used to really shame and spiritually bypass, which that means like if you're not familiar with spiritual bypassing, like using spiritual language, scripture, spiritual terms to kind of how would you describe that? Like dismiss
Yeah.
people's like real
Minimize.
emotional pain or minimize their pain or their process
Right.
um as a way to like move past it. It's kind of manipulative. I don't think the intent is to do that. Like I definitely had my share of that in the past. But
Yeah.
anyways, so like the whole idea of speaking out is really shamed. And we say things like this to victims like, you're bitter, or
Your
you
church,
just
you
need
have
to
church
forgive.
hurt.
Yeah, church hurt, or you're offended, or
Or that
you're
happened 20 years ago. Why are you still why are you still dealing with that or trying to wrestle through something that happened 20 years ago?
yeah,
As if time healed all wounds. We know that it doesn't. I mean, time helps, but it's not a
yeah,
magic pill, and so you mix time, the time component with spirit, all the spiritual reasons why you, victim and survivor, should be past this, whatever this is.
yeah,
And the fact is, like, that's not how it works. Like, from a body standpoint, that's not how your body works. From I don't know, every realm. Like, when's the last time you were quoted a Bible verse and it just fixed everything for you?
yeah.
I mean, No, I'm not knocking the Bible. The Bible's important, and we still sometimes read the Bible. I don't read it much, but I like hearing the Bible. I think that it's an important part, but it's not this magic pill that you know um somebody gives you a Bible verse, says, "Hey, this is supposed to cure all of your ailments,"
Yeah.
right? Um anyway, I could go on a whole rabbit trail with that, but you were kind of talking about hot button words that people use
Yeah.
for speaking to victims, to as a way to get them to get past, like, ignore slash override their
Yeah.
experience and pain and grief and trauma, etc.
Or anger too, like, "Oh, you're angry." Yeah.
Yeah,
You said something that made me think of a conversation I was having with another friend who's kind of been processing her own, like, deconstruction and spiritual abuse, and it was kind of on the lines of what you were saying, and it was, like, this idea that we want, like, it's really an American Christian culture thing, like, fix it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there's not room for process, and there's so much about our spiritual life that really is a process. And we are taught this transactional, right? Like
yeah.
Christianity, where if you pray this prayer, if you repent of all these things, like I think about sozo, for example, like the four open doors, like if you close your four open doors, then you're going to be delivered and you're going to have no more problems.
Hmm.
And again, like you're saying, it's not that those things can't work and that they don't help. It's just that it's the idea that if you do A and B, you'll get C, instead of
Yeah,
understanding that it's not always that simple.
yeah. Formulaic slash fast food Christianity. And actually, it's not linear either, is it? Because A plus B doesn't always equal C. Matter of fact, sometimes it's A, or actually, I think a lot of times you don't even start with the first letter. You start with maybe X or G or something. Then you go back to A, and then you might go to Z and then come back to B. Like, it's all over the place. Like, this stuff is not linear. I know for me, this past year and a half, almost year and a half, I guess, since October of 2023, November 2023, when the Mike Bickle stuff hit the fan, like, we've been, as we said in other episodes, we've been on our deconstruction and healing and whatever you want to call it journey post church since 2011. That's when we last were actually a part of a church, which was Bethel at the time. So we've had a long time to do this and process and work through stuff. But when the scandals hit with IHOP back in October, November 2023, and then started playing itself out in public, like in real time, that for me, and I think a lot of people, was just it's been like a whole nother, it's like somebody took my skin off. They literally pulled my skin off. I'm just bleeding
Yeah.
profusely. The stuff that I thought that I had figured out and gotten, like, past, or, largely maybe had some measure of healing, um, was very much brought to the surface again. And so here recently, that's happening again. It's
Yeah.
happening in full force, in our, in both of our lives personally, and it's hard. It's like, and I think for us, what we were talking about earlier today was the fallout. One of the areas of fallout for us that we've experienced was the community we were part of in Texas before we moved back to the Carolinas 10 years ago. And like, navigating those dynamics even now, like, is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still, in a lot of ways, feel stuck and very lonely in the process, because the community we've had more than one time where, like, we literally had nothing left of the community that we were a part of, the communities plural that we were a part of. And now here you are, you're like, that was over 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I told her yesterday, I think it was, I don't want to wait another 10 years and be in the same place I am now, 10 years from now, which is one of the reasons why we've chosen to do this podcast, so we can actually process this stuff publicly, to the extent possible. Like, we probably can't share everything publicly, but we want to be vulnerable. And this just helps us. We've found we're starting to experience a little bit of how speaking and owning our story is extremely healing. And again, though, it's like you get a little measure of healing and then you walk back to letter A
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, let me do this again. Let me embrace this again. Let me have some more meetings with my therapist. Let me talk to my wife a few more nights, in the evenings. Let me, I don't even know what the other options are. Those are the options we have right now. Like we don't have a big support community that we can go and talk to. So we're just talking to a camera and trying to share and
Yeah.
looking for, frankly, to connect with others of y'all out there who may or may not be in a similar boat or have been in that kind of situation in the past. So that was a long sentence. I
I was
think that
like,
was
"Whoa, I can take a breath
probably
there."
probably the longest sentence I've ever
It
had in
just
my whole
speaks
life.
to, right, like, how much is inside that we've held inside for
Yeah,
so long, and it's like, yeah, here we are. Um, what I was thinking about, is the layers, right? Like, I think back we were just talking about this actually, I was talking about this with my therapist, and I'll share a little bit about my personal process, but,
okay.
like, when we left Texas, which we shared about in another episode, a little bit about,
Yeah,
um, when we left there and came here, I was on the couch for almost 7 months, you know? I
yeah,
went through therapy. I was in therapy weekly, and all I did, honestly, like, it's embarrassing to say, but I was really depressed. Like, I
yeah,
was super depressed. I went to therapy, I cried a lot, I read my Bible, I was angry. I was just like that was pretty much all I could do, and then, like, we spent some time with our family, and that was 7 months. And during that process, like, I unpacked a lot of what happened there. And I even went through a process of forgiveness. Like, I forgave the people who hurt me. And I think
yeah. Let's talk
I
about
like,
that.
yeah, like, for the forgiveness piece is a really big deal for me because, like, on a personal level, like, I believe forgiveness is important. I think that that's, what Jesus asks us to do. However, how I was taught about forgiveness and what I was taught about forgiveness was it's like this one time thing. It's something you do quickly, you rush into. But as I've gone on this journey, I've realized there's a reason that Jesus said 70 times 7 because that means you're going to have to do it over and over again. Every time and also like witnessing the pain. You have to witness the pain. You have to witness the anger. You have to
What can I interrupt? What does
yeah,
that mean?
to
The
witness the
I
pain.
mean, I've heard you say that, a lot. I've learned from you
Yeah,
about
okay.
witnessing. So somebody's hearing you say what, witnessing. What does that even mean
It's
to
part of
witness?
telling a story. So, like, right, like when I'm in therapy, I'm talking about the parts that were painful, right? And what that brings up in me. And as I'm sharing with a safe other person, right, in that context, I'm sharing how it
Mhm.
impacted me, what beliefs it left me with, feeling the emotions, right? The sensations in my body, like the full embodied experience of my trauma.
Okay.
Like I am witnessing that is witnessing, and that is a really important part of this forgiveness is like there's anger involved, right? There's grief, there's sadness, there's shock, there's all of the different like core emotions we have as humans. And so like for me, I did that to an extent, right? Like 10 years ago. And I've forgiven those people. I chose to, but as I've gone on this journey, right, like you said, like all this stuff that came out like a couple years ago, it's like more layers and more
Yeah.
layers. And it brings up different parts of the story that I'm like, I've forgotten about, right?
Hmm.
And so it's
Yeah.
just like
Ditto.
I'm forgiving again, right? I'm choosing to forgive again. I'm choosing to walk through that again. So it's a process. And so it's not like anger is part of the process, grief, like all of these things. And so when I hear people say when a victim is sharing they're angry, I'm like, hell yeah. Like feel your anger. Like that is part of this is you are going to be angry. You are going to be sad.
Yeah.
And like sorry, I get on my soapbox with this cuz it's tied to what I do for work,
Yeah.
but like um I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to
You're
me.
talking about, it's normal for a victim to get angry, right? If they've been harmed.
Yes. Yeah. So
We're talking
like
about witnessing, uh, witnessing
yeah.
and stuff like that.
So when we're quick to be like, you're angry or you're bitter, like people, I've watched those words be weaponized against victims and people who are in their healing process. And it makes me so upset because I'm like, yes, of course you're bitter. Of course you're angry. Of course you're sad. Like you're in process.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
yeah,
like, I mean, I like to bring in. real world, I don't want to say real world, but like, what's the word? Natural examples of this stuff, because this stuff is kind of invisible. Like pain, emotional pain. It's not like you can look at a part of your body that says, "Oh yeah, this part's painful." But like with your physical health, for example, like if somebody goes in for surgery, if they have an open bypass surgery, the surgeon's got them on the operating table, right? That person's in pain. That's why they freaking use anesthetics
Yeah.
to numb the pain so they can go in and cut you open and do what they need to do to fix it. And so there's nobody I think that would say to a heart, um, somebody who's gone through heart surgery, they would not say, "Hey, you should not feel pain
Yeah,
where they
exactly. Yeah.
operated on you."
Yeah.
Everybody understands that, hey, that's a painful experience because they literally operated on you. They had to cut you open. So when it comes to like in the Christian world and a lot of the hyper charismatic world, it's ironic. I find this really ironic. I've thought about this before. I don't know if I ever told you this, but it's like on the one hand, we are so in the hyper, I say we loosely because I don't consider myself a part of the church and like the regular church anymore, even though I love God. Anyway, the hypercharismatic church is very focused on feeling the presence of God,
Yeah.
right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of emphasis on that, and I think that's good. I think there's a lot of good for that. The good of for the or good in that. But when it comes to feeling the range and the array and the spectrum of emotions that come with pain, trauma, loss, grief, everything else, especially in places like Bethel.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no grid or almost no grid. I don't want to say there's no grid. There are some pockets of people in there who do have a grid. And I was able to meet, some of those people at Bethel, but largely like if somebody's diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's as if you are ignoring and overriding. We can't possibly, it's like, I'm just going to say it. It's like one of Bill's most famous quotes, Bill Johnson. I can't afford to have a thought in my mind that he doesn't have. Well, except
Oh,
you were reading the other day in, I don't know what gospel it was, but it was when Jesus was going to go heal the girl, right? Or was it Lazarus? Do you
yeah,
remember? Do you
it was
remember?
Lazarus.
It
Yeah,
was
Lazarus.
Lazarus,
Yeah.
and didn't he was angry.
Yeah, it was so crazy. I'd never seen this before. See, I'm like looking for this now when I read the Bible. Jesus's expression of real emotions. Like Jesus got angry and it said that he was overwhelmed. It says that he was distressed, like in different places in the Bible. I'm like, if God was distressed
And angry.
and angry and overwhelmed, then I'm pretty sure that we can too.
But isn't that what, I don't have the Bible in front of me, but isn't that like in that passage you can tell that the anger is what
Yeah.
helped motivate him to go
Yes.
and then raise Lazarus from the dead.
Yes, it says
Like,
that he was angry and then he went to go
yeah,
like he went to the tomb.
right.
So it
So
motivated
so
him. Yeah.
here's an example of a like in the life of Jesus, the Son of God who's perfect, who experienced anger and he actually acted on his anger, right? He did something with his anger. And I just want to say, all y'all church leaders out there telling us to stay in our lane and quit, giving in to the spirit of accusation and all the other PR nonsense that y'all are throwing out and trying to shut people down and silence people. Stop it. Just stop it. Like the people that are speaking out are mostly people who have experienced harm in their life, period. Okay. And on top of that, there are people who are advocating and care about the people that have been harmed, and they're speaking out about it. So, in what world does it make sense for you as a leader to shut down the things that people are saying that they experienced in their own life? Like, you don't get to do that. You actually don't get to do that. So, I want to call with my little bitty tiny voice. I want to tell all y'all church leaders, stop it. Quit. You are harming more people. You are creating a secondary wave of abuse, of spiritual abuse. When you tell people to get off of social media, you tell people to stop talking about, the spirit of accusation, you're partnering with the accuser of the
Oh, yeah, hate
brethren.
that one.
That is actually false. That's actually false. It is a lie. It is a manipulative tactic
Yeah.
that you are using, church leader, if any of y'all are listening to this, and you need to stop it. Um, and I got news for you. We're reaching a tipping point here. We are.
Yeah.
I think that I told John Collins yesterday or 2 days ago. I told him I think I would like to think that we are on the verge of a reformation.
Yeah, I hope so.
And what I see as the 95 Theses that Martin Luther nailed on the door of the church at Wittenberg when the famous day that he went there, Reformation Day that we now call it, 1517, I think. He nailed the 95 Theses on the door. And that was his declaration of like, I have a problem with you, Catholic Church, and what you're teaching. What you're teaching is not biblical. And those were his 95 reasons why. I think what we're doing right now, us and so many other great people on social media and on podcasts and other avenues behind the scenes, we are nailing our theses up on the door of the church.
Yeah.
Except now, the door of the church is not this wooden door on the church building. It's in the town square of X, Instagram, TikTok, what else?
Facebook. Yeah.
YouTube, and all these other different
Yeah.
places, Facebook. And people are talking and more people are going to talk. And I think that we're reaching a tipping point. I would like to think that this stuff is going to lead to back to our example in the Bible of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Like I would like to think that our collective voice is going to result in a reformation.
Yeah. I really pray and hope that. In my heart, I'm like feeling like this has to like, yeah, be coming to a head. Like, and just back to like some of the things you said, like about like to pastors and stuff, like, you know, toxic positivity has been the message in many charismatic churches.
Bethel, especially.
Toxic positivity, and it's this idea that we need to be happy and up, and that's what faith looks like. But that isn't. Like, faith is the full spectrum of our humanity lived out honestly and in truth, with God. And I think like my own process is like God can handle my real.
Yeah.
And that's faith. Faith isn't pretending that I'm not angry and bitter and mad. It's saying I'm bitter and I'm angry and I'm mad and I don't believe, and God help me.
Mm,
Like help me. Like this is where I'm at. And like there's so much freedom when you get to a place where you realize that you don't have to pretend anymore, like in your faith, that you can actually be your authentic self before God. Like that it's there's freedom in that. Like he is not afraid, you're not in sin if bringing your anger to God. But that's the message, this toxic
yeah.
positivity. And so I would say to the pastors too, like, you need to make room
Yeah.
for healthy expression of emotions
Yeah.
and humanity, like being a real human. Like, there's this message that we need to be robots, like
Mhm.
these super spiritual robots that are all about like miracles and like, right? All about restoration, all about like those are good things. I want those things. But the reality is there's death and resurrection, and there's a lot of good that comes through, right? Some of the pain that we go through. We don't want to go through pain. I don't want to go through pain and suffering, but I have, and it's changed what I believe about stuff. It's
Mhm.
changed
It does
what I
that.
believe faith is and what trust with God is and what that looks like to walk that out, and how messy it is, right? How very messy it is. Like you said, not linear.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I really hope that we're at a tipping point. And one of the other notes I had was just like talking about church for a minute. Like,
Hmm.
I don't remember if we talked about this, but like one of the like I think we did mention this. We said like we never planned on not going to church. Like, it just happened, right? We experienced these things. We found
Yeah.
ourselves in a community where there was no safe place to go. We moved out here and we actually did attend. We attended a mega church for a little while.
No, I wouldn't even say a little while. We went a few
Couple
times.
a few times.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, we attended somewhere for a little while and then COVID happened and that was like, right, not an option. But I think, for me, I know we're in actually different places with the church stuff, which is fine.
Yeah.
But um I'm actually in a place where, and I did, like, I can go into a church. It's not triggering like it was. Like, the first time we went back to church after spiritual abuse, I was shaking.
Yeah. You
I
talking
had
about
like a,
at the mega church?
yeah, and I
Yeah, that
came
would have
home.
been 2018, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I came home and that would be a fun story to tell people. Anyways,
Yeah, I'm sure y'all can probably put two and two together and figure out which one we're talking about. But
wait, let me, yeah,
what?
well, I
Yeah,
want
go
to
ahead.
finish my train of thought. So, anyways, like, I'm healed enough where I can go to church because, like, the whole argument's like, well, there's good churches and there's good pastors and there's pastors that aren't abusive and there's places that aren't toxic. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I agree with you. And I've even ventured out, like, in our nearby area and found a place that I really, really liked and really felt safe with. But the
Yeah.
challenge that I have now is the whole model. I'm like, why am I going to go? And this like really upsets people, but it's like, why would I go and sit and just consume information? Like, yes, okay, there's corporate worship. I don't know anybody there, right? Like I'm healing from this spiritual abuse. I'm trying to move forward and make community. I walk into a church, I don't know anybody, right? I'm there to meet people supposedly, but like I'll just give you this example. So I'm sitting by myself, consuming information, which I'll be honest, like I could take or leave a sermon. Like
Yeah.
I don't really need that.
Right.
Like I can read the Bible on my own. I can open up my phone and listen to 1,000 different sermons that I wanted to at any time of the day.
For sure. Or
Um,
podcasts or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, so get involved to meet people. I went to a
Yeah.
women's event and the women were really nice, but it was 5 hours on a Sunday. And my family's at home and I'm here and I'm thinking, this something's not right here. This like there has to be more to church than this like it's very, I don't know, consumeristic, right? It's like go and sit and consume or the other option is go serve. And what makes me upset is I'm like I have places that I feel like I'm serving in my job and I don't want to sit and consume.
Yeah.
So where's a place to just go when you're hurting and broken?
Yeah.
Where's the space for trauma survivors to just come into your church and be?
Yeah.
Like there really isn't places
Yeah.
for people like us in church right
Well, there are a
now.
lot of people on X that are in that boat. I mean, I've interacted with a lot of y'all and it's great. I mean, I honestly feel like I'm more able to connect with people on Twitter/X around that, right? Because you're in a similar, even though everybody's experience is unique and different,
Yeah.
but you have the gamut of people who are either, they still say they are Christians, they believe in God, they love Jesus, and then there are people who are post IHOP KC, for example, or post Bethel, and they don't, consider themselves Christians anymore, which is fine. I actually, to be honest with you, a lot of times feel way more comfortable around Christians or non-Christians than I do Christians.
Yeah.
So back to your point, like you make a great point. I don't know what the answer is. I just think that there are more and more people, especially us millennials, that are not within the confines of like a regular traditional church. And if like all of us could just somehow get together
I know. What's the
and
thing? It's all online. It's not in
it's all
person.
online, but like, how, how do you do that? Like, how do you get together? Like, are there regional? And the thing is it requires somebody to be the leader. And I think this is what I told her, like, I don't wanna lead a ministry, I don't lead a church or anything. And I know a lot of people don't wanna do that, like, they don't wanna
Yeah.
be that person. They're trying to help themselves get better. They
Right.
don't really
Yeah.
have the space to, like,
Yes.
come in and try to do this. So, and we all have our families and our jobs and everything else, and busy. But there's got to be something out there that can work. There's got to be, like, a format or a I don't know, I have no idea. It's like we're still so programmed in the US mindset, the Western culture to associate everything church around the building and the service.
Yeah.
So what could it look like that's different, right? Like I don't know. I don't have the answer. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, and it's like what you said, like, Adam was just on the John Collins podcast, and you were showing it's so patterned after the Old Testament. If you really think about it, we've got a person up on a platform that's like the man of God or the priest,
Or the
right?
group of,
And then all
yeah,
the people below, and you're serving this system. And again, if you love your church and you like church, good for you. But for a lot of
yeah,
us, I know for us, I'm like, I can't go I'm having a hard time going back to something that feels dead to me. Like I don't there's not life in that model for me. And like to me, I'm like I'm looking to sit and like have a meal and like can we like to me my ideal church would be like let's go to a park and let our kids play together and just share how our week was and eat some food
yeah.
and maybe we pray
Which,
for each other. Hey, oh, you're struggling. Okay, I'll pray for you. Or maybe we get together once in a while and go serve at a homeless, shelter or so. Like
yeah,
to me, like that sounds so refreshing instead of like all of this like hoopla that we call church
yeah. The
now.
programs and the offering and
It's
the
like why?
volunteering and all this.
Why?
I honestly just thinking about it just makes me tired. Like
It's yes, it feels
I don't want
exhausting.
to, I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
So, but that's okay. I mean, we're all in a
Yeah.
different spot. I know you and I are in different, a little bit different spots on
Yeah,
that,
we
which is
are.
fine. It's okay. We don't have to be in the same place. But but yeah, just trying to figure out navigate. I think for us, just we're trying to just full disclosure, like trying to navigate, and we've been in this spot for a long time. Like, what do we do about community? We don't
Yeah.
have the answer to that either. Um, because historically for a long time, like our community was centered around
Yep.
our
Yep.
church
For
life,
sure.
right? Like our church experience. And I had great community. I mean, I know you did too at Bethel.
Mhm.
We had a great community at
Yeah.
Bethel. We had lots of people there that were awesome, and I missed that. I really missed that. Probably missed that more than anything. I had a great community in Kansas City when I lived there. And so Texas, not so much. Texas was,
No, yeah.
you know, but I mean, it was still a loss. Like we still had a loss of relationship leaving Texas. So all that to say, like we're trying to like navigate and still figure out how do we get community again. It's just like for me at least, I'm not willing to go back to the same pond to find the community in the church, right? Like, and maybe that's my problem. Maybe I should do that. Maybe that's the magic pill. Like go back and find friends at church. I am triggered by going to like when I think about going to church, like, it triggers me. I can't watch sermons by and large, like, I've just now gotten to the point where I can start listening to some of the podcasts out there that are more oriented towards, like, theology a little bit,
Yeah.
like and I just wanna give a shout out to minor prophets, like John Mark Baker and Justin is it Justin or Jeff? I can't remember the other co-host, but, they've been great, like, because 'cause they're like bringing truth, but also vulnerability, which I love. And then
Yeah.
also Remnant Radio. I really appreciate what they're doing. Blaze and Christina, of course. So I don't know, like, I don't know what my point was. Just
No,
trying
we're
to
just
figure out,
yeah.
like, talking around community.
Yeah, and like
Like,
figuring out what does church look like now. And we'd love to hear from you guys too. Like
yeah,
put in the comments or email us like this is so challenging. And I think so many people, and again, this is really personal, but I see a lot of people go through a spiritually abusive situation and they heal up a little bit, but then they're like right back into church. And and then I've seen some people kind of like church hop. And I think this is too, even if you haven't experienced spiritual abuse, I think there's a discontentment around this too. I think people are actually hungry for something more than what it is. And so I'm really curious to see, like you said, with this, like there's a reformation, like what might change with this. And yeah, I think sometimes people, this is just my opinion, can jump back into church too quickly after spiritual abuse. And it like you can just rinse and repeat, right? Another like situation. Or I notice people will go from like, right, if you're in the charismatic world, you'll like,
wait. I don't think it's recording anymore. Is it? It is recording. Oh shoot, I interrupted you. We'll have to edit that
okay,
out.
okay.
So keep going.
So yeah, I think there's like some people that like may have come from the charismatic world that will like do a jump into more like reformed, right? Like
Yeah.
world. Like it's very interesting people's journey with it. But there's a lot of people I know that share our view. They like can't step foot in a church right now, but they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And like I just want to say this too, like again, like kind of speaking to you if you're a leader in a church right now, like and I work in like mental emotional health, like that's what I do for work. And work with trauma victims, and I'd say this personally and on behalf of some of the women. It's like for trauma victims, like there needs to be places in the church that are safe for people to come and heal, right? Like there's a really big lack. Like and I'm not talking about a deliverance ministry. I'm talking about the answer for people is get in a small group or get in a Bible study. Well, I'm healing from trauma. I don't want to go to a Bible study. Like
Yeah.
that's triggering for me. Like what I need is someone to like hold my hand while I cry and be like, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like you're safe here. We love you." Like that's the
Yeah.
kind of care that I mean, I have a therapist and we do that and like
Yep.
but, like, that's the kind of place I'm looking to walk into or community that I'm trying to find is where people are unafraid of pain.
Mm.
Like, there needs to be a theology around humanness and pain so that these people, like, like, we call ourselves like exiles that
Yeah.
are like, we're literally like bleeding out. Like, I just want you to know, like, there are tons of people who are in tremendous pain, ourselves included, and have been,
Mm.
that are trying to find a community where we're welcomed. And so when you tell people, right, all the things like in the beginning, like this, just forgive, you're bitter, you're angry, toxic positivity, you just push people further and further away from the church. And so, like, that's my heart is like, I think about Isaiah 61. It talks about like creating places for people to mourn. Like I feel that deeply. Like can we create communities around mourning with people who are mourning and people who are grieving?
Yeah.
Um
It's good.
anyways,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we can. I think we're trying to do that, and a lot of people are trying to do that, like, in the online venue, right, of X and the rest of the platforms, in speaking out and helping advocate for victims that come forward, that have the bravery and courage to come forward with their story.
Yeah.
Um, that is those are the that's the framework of what you're talking about. That is the framework of you said a theology for mourning and grief and pain and suffering, like people who can embrace that and understand it and be comfortable with it. Not that it's always comfortable, it's hard. Like you
Yeah, it
walk
is hard.
you know, stand with people who go through hard stuff. It's not easy to do that. And you have to also take care of yourself too. Like you have to
Yeah.
identify your limits as well, which is all normal. But yeah, I think I'm just saying yes. Where I think we're trying to do that just with these different online tools. But there's something about in person that you can't, like, you never can replace online with in person. Like we're in person right
Yeah.
now. So we're trying to do our best with that, with what we have, and then hoping for, something better in the future.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I had another thought about like just in regards to church. Like I think what you said is good. Like, yeah, you do have to take care of yourself, right? We're not a never-ending like empathy, like we're humans too. We have limits around empathy and like how much we can hold space for others. I think too something that I think about like in some of these systems we've been a part of is like this idea, right, of the leader being so far up on a pedestal is like they're so out of touch too with like broken people. Like, I feel like our churches nowadays are for the healthy and not for the sick.
mhm,
And so what I hear is messages towards like the healthy and the ones that are doing well
yeah,
and not to the ones who are broken and sick and struggling and in pain and in trauma
mm,
or the victims, right? Like
yeah,
I think when you're so far up here and you're like you can be so out of touch with those who are like low to the ground.
oh yeah,
And
for sure,
um yeah, I think that's part of like some of that dominionism, right? The seven mountains, toxicity,
Mhm.
and just again, toxic positivity that is,
Silence culture,
yeah,
aka honor culture,
yeah, like be
which
quiet about it. Don't
yeah,
talk about
I'm
it.
really riled up about that right
Yeah.
now. Like that's what I was talking to John Collins about the other day on his podcast. Like I'm not, I refuse to call it honor culture anymore. It's not honor culture, it's silence culture. And but here's the thing. It's like it'd be like you're driving down the road and there's this big ugly fence that you drive by and a big sign somebody put up on the fence that says, "Don't look at this fence." Like a billboard, like you put a billboard up next to the fence that says, "Don't look at the fence." Everybody's gonna look at the fence.
Yeah.
So the more I got news for you, church leaders, narcissist church leaders that continue to say to be quiet, I got news for you. The more you say that, the more people are going to talk.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. It's human nature. You were trying to tamp down, and people are going to continue to speak. More and more people, more courage, more truth, more everything. And so I'm actually hopeful that, like, again, like I said already, that is going to lead us to a tipping point.
I hope so.
I just
Yeah.
think that it's more and more people left with the bag like us and trying to figure out what does life look like post church, whether you're on the Christian spectrum or not. Like I'm perfectly fine taking my mountain bike and getting together with a few people and riding on some trails or hiking or whatever. We don't have to talk about God at all. Like I'm perfectly comfortable with that. Matter of fact, I'm more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just me personally. Just thinking out loud of
Well,
what that could look like, but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I have
What
some thoughts
were you
on
gonna
that,
say?
and we've talked about this too. Like, I think where we're at too, like, is like friendship first. Like we're just like give us like the base level. Like we just want to like have some just relationships, right? Without the pressure of trying to do anything
Yeah,
spiritual. And I really struggled with that because I'm like, I was just telling a friend, I'm like, I can't even imagine like going to a prayer meeting
yeah. I
or
don't
like
know.
even
Yeah,
worship, like gathering to worship with people. Like that feels really overwhelming right now. And I felt like I was struggling with that. And I actually prayed about it. And I'm like, I felt like the Lord was like, well, yeah, of course. Like you need your bare minimum. Like, how about just having some relationships first? And like, I think we're trying to like build a house with like right without like the foundation and like missing things. It's like you don't like go and try to do ministry. Like you build
yeah,
relationship, right? Like you build the foundation of like trust and authenticity and community. Like as that's like the bottom layer. So
yeah,
when you like go up here and try to do all these like spiritual things, like
yeah. It doesn't
it's
matter.
like religion. I don't know. It's I don't know. It's
It's
missing
the
the
cart.
substance.
Yeah, it's the cart before the horse.
Yeah. So, like that's so far, I feel like down the road for us. It's like you're saying, like
What do you mean specifically? Are you saying ministry or
I don't know, like
yeah?
like the thought of like doing anything like
I mean, I'll be
ministry
honest. Yeah,
spiritually with
I
people.
don't have any interest in
I
that,
know you don't.
like
Yeah.
at all. Like now, I'm willing to have my mind changed, but I feel like that ship sailed a long time
Yeah.
ago. But like to me, that's what I told John the other day. Um, it's like when the hurricane hit, just helping people. Like to
Yeah.
me, that is the kind of stuff that matters. Like going and feeding people or generators because their power's out or trying to get rescue boats up the river. I mean, stuff like that. Like it's like how you mentioned some of the Bethel mission trips that we did
Oh my gosh.
back in the day where
Oh, I want to talk about that.
it's like, one of the focuses on a lot of the trips was prophetic art. And you're in Africa and you brought art supplies, your team brings art supplies to do prophetic art for starving people. It's like, I don't think starving people care about prophetic art. I think
Oh
what
my
they care
gosh.
about is
Yes.
they're hungry. These kids are hungry. The children are running around like orphans, and they don't have a lot of them don't even have parents, and they're hungry,
No,
and
I
they
gotta,
they
yeah,
need to be fed. They don't
totally.
need prophetic art.
Exactly.
Why are we doing that? Like I think I would like to think that I know why they do that and, that their heart was sincere and everything, but I don't know, it just doesn't it's there's so much wrong with that
Yes, it shows
picture.
how out it's that's what I was talking about the
They're out
really
of
top
touch.
up being so out of touch with the like we're so like in these again, I'll speak for the charismatic like the NAR, new
The hyper
apostolic, yeah, hyper charismatic groups because that's what we've been a part of and really steeped in.
Yeah,
Like this idea of how important we are and how, with
yeah,
our little like we come in with our healing mission and our quote unquote revival, whatever. Ugh, I'm so sick of that word mission to these countries and we think that we're going to go in there and like yeah like they're hungry and
mhm,
like what give them some water, give them some food before we try to like
yeah,
oh that made me think of something else. I'm part of a religious trauma group. It's like a Facebook group online and I felt so sad for this girl. And it's I'm in there. I learned so much from the people in there. Most of the people in there do not identify as Christians anymore, hadn't left their faith. But I learned so much from them and I feel so much compassion for them. One of the girls in there, she and her husband were struggling. They went to like a food bank at a church to get some food because they were like desperate.
mhm.
And she said they like basically like told them they had to listen to like the gospel or something
Before they could be
before they could eat the food. And then get this,
that's ridiculous.
gave them expired food. And she was sharing about this and I was like, "Oh my gosh." I reached out to her and and I helped her. We helped her. We sent her
Yeah,
money. Like that's what's wrong. It's love first. It's not this transactional, right? Like it's so out of touch. Like I think that's why Jesus emphasized love. Like that is the most important commandment before
yeah,
any agenda. I don't even like the agenda just needs to like go in the trash can. Like let's just love people
yeah.
without any
Turn off the
like you
lights,
don't need to
cameras.
preach even the gospel to them. Just show them
Yeah.
love. Do you know how powerful that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think even people that don't believe in God, like, they can tell. They know,
Yes.
they
Yeah.
can feel, they can tell when you care about them,
Yeah.
and, yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. We've complicated it. We've made it about a fanfare.
Yeah.
We've made it about a very important person at the top of the food
Yep.
chain who
Yep.
is extremely gifted at communicating and motivating the crowd and writing books and
Hmm.
all of the things that go with being a narcissistic celebrity pastor. Somebody made the point last that you sent me something last night that in the Bible there it was never even described like a pastor was never described like it is now. Like what was it?
Yeah, I
It
forget.
had several
Yes.
different
Somebody sent it to
verses in
me.
the Bible that it was more of a group of leaders,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't, and that's a very American concept that you have one guy at the top of the food chain,
Yeah.
the CEO, as it were, of the church. So that's a lot of the stuff that many of us have opted out of that we're not going back to, and so eventually the cash flow, I think, will dwindle. And when the cash flow dwindles, the hirelings are going to scatter. The people that say that they're shepherds of the sheep, but they're actually hirelings, like Jesus talked about, they're in it for the reputation,
Yeah.
the fame, the money, and the sex and everything else. All of that, glory, as if you
Yeah.
will. So,
We got to do a whole episode on money stuff. Holy cow.
yeah, I
Cuz
have a
I'm
lot
like
to say about that.
yeah, we have
Just,
a lot to say about that.
yeah. So, yeah, hopefully, I don't know, this is just kind of us talking out loud and trying to just put words to, thoughts and words together and
Yeah.
communicate. So hopefully y'all found it helpful or, interesting or not. Maybe you didn't find it interesting, which is fine too. But let us know what you think.
Yeah.
What parting thoughts do we want to wrap
I don't
with?
know. The one that came to mind was like it's okay to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not dishonoring. And that's something that, like, if you haven't deconstructed, I would encourage you to think about, like, it's not dishonoring. It's not wrong to share these things and to talk about the things that you see wrong. It's how change happens.
Yeah.
And um yeah, I don't know, those are my kind of
Yeah.
parting thoughts.
So even if it's like a little bitty tiny blip of something that you feel like you want to share that that's burning in your heart to share, like even if it's just one little post or telling a trusted person that you feel safe with, like that's how it starts. That's how the snowball starts, and and then it gets momentum, and it becomes larger and larger, and eventually you have all of these people doing that and speaking up and using their voice and finding their voice again, and that's what we're starting to rediscover for ourselves doing this podcast.
Yeah.
So we appreciate y'all
Yeah.
being here, and definitely let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to connect with you, whether it's a comment or an email. Our email is gritinthewild@gmail.com. So it's GRITINTHEWILD at gmail.com. And again, thanks for watching. We appreciate everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.